welcome back to the Bites and Bites podcast. I'm Kristen King, and today's conversation is one I'm really excited to share. In this episode, I'm joined by Serg Masis, a data scientist and someone who thinks deeply about how data, AI, and decision-making shapes modern agriculture. We talk about digital agronomy, which is really the science of how crops grow from soil and climate to farming practices, and why better data isn't about replacing farmers, but about helping them navigate increasingly complex systems. Serg has a way of explaining AI from an engineering mindset that actually makes sense, comparing it to a murder mystery rather than a black box. This conversation moves from food culture and curiosity to system thinking, unintended consequences, and why small changes in agriculture can create ripple effects across entire food systems. If you've ever wondered how technology quietly influences what ends up on your plate, or how we're going to keep feeding people in a changing world, this episode is definitely for you. Let's get into it. In Bites and Bites tradition, we're going to start with favorite food and favorite food memory. They do not need to be the same thing. And if you can't think of anything on the spot, I'll also take a favorite food fixation that's current. Go for it.
Okay. My favorite food is hot peppers and plain
Really?
Spicy. Yeah. I guess it does tie in to my favorite food memory, which I believe it was the first time I tried curry.
Any particular type of curry? The hotter, the better? Or
No, it was, well, the thing is my parents were graduate students, and they usually would ask our neighbor from across the hall, which was a friend of my mother. She was Pakistani. So I guess it was Pakistani curry. I don't remember what it was exactly. I think it was biryani of some kind of rice and maybe some protein. But it was just so flavorful. And I've been hooked since to spicy food. I just love capsaicin, and I'm fascinated behind the history of it and, how it's cultivated, where it's, I try to cultivate some of it by myself. Yeah, I just love it.
that's the only thing they did really good in my garden this year was hot peppers. So I completely understand. And I had 4 different kinds.
Awesome. One of they can be delicate for some things, environmental things. But something you'll notice is they won't attract insects. And I find that fascinating because as a protection, biologically, they develop toxicity towards insects and other animals. And somehow we gravitate towards that, the only species that actually consumes it.
That's funny. I didn't think about that. You're right. I don't remember seeing any bugs on any of those plants, even when they were flowering. I thought it was kind of odd. But then again, I wasn't monitoring them 24/7. So there could have been, I don't know. But you're right. Because they favored my marigolds. They were next to it rather than those. So that's really interesting. I didn't think about it like that.
Yeah. And caffeine is the same. Which is another favorite of mine.
Okay. Well,
anything with caffeine is also toxic towards insects. So that's...
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So everybody plant a coffee bush and hot peppers if you want to keep insects out of your areas. That's actually really funny.
Yeah.
There was a documentary, I think, on Apple TV. It might have been last year or the year before. I could be really wrong on my years. But it was talking about food. I forget the name and the title of the documentary series. But they did an episode on hot peppers, specifically red ones that were from a certain region in, I think it was Europe. And it was super fascinating. Oh, it's the paprika plant, the one that makes paprika. And sorry, as I'm jogging my memory live here. And I had no idea what was involved in that whole process and how coveted the process is, because it's family generations passed on through generations. And it's the way you make authentic paprika, and you have to use these certain peppers and this certain method of grinding and all these things. And I thought, wow, we have these UNESCO heritage sites. We need to have them for food. This needs to be protected. Yeah. And it was really incredible listening to the stories. And then they, of course, showed how it's used in different places in the world and regions, and how important that particular spice is. I was just wow. So when you said hot peppers, that's the first thing I thought of. Granted, paprika is not super spicy. It's just flavorful, really. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I've recently run into my love of curry as well. I think over the last few years, my partner's British, and he's introduced me to various different types of curry, and he cooks a curry every Friday night out of whatever particular recipe he finds that he's really fascinated by, or he's working through a series of different types of curries. I'm not I don't want like super hot. I just want super flavorful. So we have a little bit of a balance going on there where he likes some like 5-alarm fire bad. Like I don't, I'm not interested in having my face burnt off. But it took me a while to get used to them because if you're not used to that on your palate, it's such a flavor explosion that it's almost a little bit offensive to your system. And I don't mean that in a negative way. You just don't know how to handle it because you start sweating and it's all these things. But I've been all over the world and had curry in many different places. And the funny thing is, probably one of the best curries I ever had, Indian curries, was actually in Sweden, believe it or not. So, which is kind of wild. It's amazing how you can go to different places and they do authentic really interestingly and different, but it's still just as good. So yeah, echo the curry thing for sure. Like it's great.
Yeah. Well, as much as I embrace like the hybrid cuisines that emerge from like local populations blending in with immigrant community tastes or two immigrant communities, as it happens with Toronto with the Chinese and Indian having their own blend, or there's also like happens that immigrant communities come with the cuisine and have to adapt it to the local palates. And in some places, the locals don't want that. They want authentic. And so that's why in some places you get something more authentic, in some places you get less authentic. Not necessarily that I find that offensive in any way. I think, I think it's great. Have emerged from that. Like we wouldn't have California rolls or Tex-Mex or anything like that. Americanized Chinese food. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think that's great to some degree, but it's also good to kind of trace it back to its origin. I find that fascinating when I travel, also going and seeing, okay, let me try this dish. And I find it so different from what I've already tried, which I thought was authentic, but maybe it was authentic, but that's another thing that's lost in that process, which is it's authentic for a region of that country, which is not necessarily a region you visited. So
yeah, that's true.
There's just so much lost. You think, okay, this is Thai cuisine, but there's maybe like 100 different variants of what Thai cuisine means. And you're only familiar to probably the most prominent one.
Thing though is when I traveled, obviously I think traveling really opens up your palate, like you were just saying, in so many ways, because you can be exposed to plenty of food in your own country for the most part. And usually there's immigrants that are there that provide you those meals, like we were saying. But having an authentic experience in another country with the food that you thought tasted one way and was one way, and then it's entirely different way in another and tastes differently in some ways, was really eye-opening for me and really amazing. Like Chinese food is not Chinese food in the US as it is to China. It's entirely different. I prefer Chinese food in China. I think it's amazing. I can't eat sushi in the US because I've had proper sushi in Japan. It's just wrecked me. Like I can't, that doesn't look like sushi to me. I can't eat it. I'm sure the high-end restaurants do a great job. That's great. I would be willing to sacrifice my palate for that. But I couldn't just buy like store-bought sushi. That's not sushi. That's just rice and stuff in it. Like I can't.
Yeah.
Or like ramen, for example. Proper ramen done properly is entirely different than the pack of ramen you get in college, or that kind of thing. I think that I'm so grateful that I've been to those places and I've experienced those things. I think people should try different things like that to understand. It also gets to know the people that you're around. And, then you get to start to understand the ecosystem that they live in, what they have available to them and how it's shaped their culture. I think it's such an important thing. I love that we're having this particular conversation. I feel like we should talk about food like that more in terms of it's not just what we eat, it's how we feel and the culture behind it.
Yeah, the exploratory nature of food is kind of lost when it's kind of, prepackaged and, with these very generic names that don't really tell you anything about the history of it. Even for processed food, I find it fascinating, the history of, sliced bread and how it came to be, even though it's maligned for many reasons, like nutritional and otherwise, it's a convenience. But even the way sliced bread is done here is different than the way it's done in Japan.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Korea, or throughout the world. So it is interesting, how the palate of these different cultures changes things, either more sweet or more savory, or they like it not as processed, or maybe they even process it more. Like it's interesting.
Yep. I always find it really telling when someone says, try licorice, right? Do you prefer the red licorice, which is more like the cherry berry forward, or do you prefer the black licorice, which is more intense flavors and more, sarsaparilla, maybe even root beer to a degree? And it's interesting because people always turn their nose up at the black licorice. And I say, do you know that this is like a super popular candy in certain countries? Like this is it. This is their favorite.
Yeah.
And even root beer. I've watched people from various countries try root beer for the first time and they're like, this is horrible.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, it's amazing because it's part of my childhood experience. So I'm like, this is great. And I love that kind of stuff. So it was super interesting because people are like, oh yeah, of course I love red licorice, like Swedish fish and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, well, black licorice is kind of a thing. And like root beer and that whole flavor palette is different for people. So it always, that fascinates me, watching people make faces if they don't like something or if they love it. Just like this whole world explosion of excitement happens. And that's what food does to people. And it's so, I just love that. I just love that aspect of it. Before we keep like going down this amazing conversation, quickly, let's have you introduce yourself to the listeners.
Okay, well, I'm a data scientist. I specialize in interpretable machine learning, agentic AI. I'm kind of a tinker of different technologies. Long time been in the technology space. One could say even the data space, because who hasn't been tinkering with Excel for the longest time at the very least. Like now I do it with code and, other means, but it's still like, to me, it's just a sense of exploration of data it's what drives me. The insights, the predictions, all these things. I think it's all about making our decision making better. And I think ultimately that's the goal. I think people think, okay, well, data's out, or machine learning or AI is out to replace humans. I think it's just out to enhance our decision making process, hopefully for better outcomes in general in business, but also at a personal level. I try that ethos even with my own decision making. I think it helps me move forward with confidence, things that, maybe a lot of people wouldn't think too much about, but I think that ultimately may have like a longer effect. Like for instance, choosing my son's pediatrician, I might say, okay, well, let's try some alternatives, but I just want to be confident I'm choosing the best one because it'll be the pediatrician for years to come, hopefully. And so I want to put everything in a spreadsheet and kind of figure things out, from that angle. But I think you want that with anything pretty much. And so that's what motivates me. I work at Syngenta. I probably should have led with that.
Okay.
Well, a leading agribusiness company. That's a connection with food as well. I work in digital agronomy, which is actually the part that touches the farmer's decision making. So like when we talk about the three kind of main inputs, well, if we think of it kind of like a very general level, you're talking about environment, and you're talking about genetics, right? So you got the plant seed, you got the environment in which it grows, but then there's all this decision-making input, where to plant, how much to space in, what products to apply, if anything, how to prepare the soil, if you prepare the soil. There's just so much decision-making goes on. That's other input. Right. So there's like three in that equation. And I work in the third one, which is like the least known or less like optimized of all three. Like we look at farming over the last 100 years, we've optimized environment, we've optimized genetics, but have we optimized decision making? A lot of farmers are still using 19th century techniques with tools from the 20th and 21st century. And so we want to bring it up to that level. And it's just a hard thing to do.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's difficult to bolt in modern into legacy equipment, for sure. It's done. We always kind of joke that it's done with bubble gum and shoestring or duct tape, because it feels that way sometimes. Getting people to transition from what's always been working to what has to work in the future because of the amount we need to feed people. We have a tremendous population in the world now that needs to be fed. Yeah. Obviously, precision farming is going to help us with sustainability. I also realize that there are listeners on here that consider that to be a hot button topic. I'm not going to get into that right now, but just so everyone knows, we feel you. I understand that there's a lot of emotions and frustrations around that when whatever country you're listening from. And I do acknowledge that. break, and thank you for listening. If you're enjoying the show, please take a moment to like, comment, follow, and share it with someone who would appreciate it. Every bit of support helps more people find these conversations, and I'm truly grateful for all the messages, the feedback, and the stories you've been sending to me. Hearing about how these episodes resonate with you means more than you know. And since we're heading into the holiday season, I want to encourage you to help where you can. Consider donating to your local food pantry. You can find one at findhelp.org. Call a local farm and ask if you can sponsor a farm share for a family in need. Localharvest.org is a great place to start. Reaching out also to a local school to support their breakfast or lunch programs when the holidays are over, or simply being a grocery buddy for someone nearby who could use a hand. Food insecurity isn't just an American issue, it's global. And while I'm not sponsored by any of these organizations, I generally believe that if we have the tools, resources, and access, we should use them to help make sure people have food. Thank you for caring, and now back to the episode. I think when people hear like AI and farming, though, kind of freaked out, like we're going to have like crazy robots and it's going to be some scene out of the Matrix harvesting people, or I don't know what they're thinking, but
yeah,
it's not that crazy. It's actually quite common sense based. Like you said, there's so much data moving around that what are we supposed to do with all that data? I know people automatically think data protection and they think privacy. That's fine. Those are great things to think about. AI has the ability to take all that data and start making sense of it in ways that we probably haven't even thought of thinking about it. I think that's what excites me about AI and data in general is how we can take it and make things better and learn from past mistakes faster because we have this non-emotional thing looking at it, if you will. I shouldn't say thing. It's not a thing. Yeah. It is a thing, but you know what I mean? But we don't have that like non-biased way of looking at things. And that's what I'm excited about for the farming communities is because maybe we can have some type of patterns between global climate change and weather and soil and animals and all this other stuff. And maybe there's things that we haven't thought of yet to start figuring out how we deal with the changing world, whether that's human driven or environmental driven.
Yeah. No, obviously like everything you say is like right on point. I think it's just we've scaled things up, you know, with food production, with optimizing certain processes over the last 100 years enormously. But we haven't thought of the sustainability component to a large degree because as we've pretty much exhausted every piece of like cultivatable land or easily cultivatable land over that period of time, we haven't thought, okay, what does this mean in the neighborhood ecosystem in which this lives? You know, what does this do to the plants and animals that are nearby, the insects, and how does that affect the process? Because even as you're thinking, well, you know, if I make a good seed for this kind of soil, it should be good through and throughout. There are other things that like runaway effects that happen that are really hard to manage and to even predict. So how do you mitigate all those things in a very sensible way and still produce the same amount of food or even more? And that's come to be a really tough thing to do because there's a lot of things that can be done to mitigate effects, like some that are kind of natural and unnatural. Like if you can cultivate in the desert and bring the water there. And in the desert, you're not going to have a problem with insects and, you know, a lot of like animals that want to feast on your food because they're not native to that place. But you're also kind of changing the landscape around and kind of having other effects. So like, I find it really interesting. You brought up, you know, all this AI and all these robots and all these other things. And these are awesome tools. But when it comes down to basics, it's all about like, how do we model this environment, this soil, create kind of a digital twin and kind of simulate what goes on behind the scenes? And how do we optimize this? Every kind of decision taken to kind of make the amount of food we need to make. Even if that means, okay, let's not produce food here. Let's produce it somewhere else, you know, or let's produce at a different time or use like a different method, you know, that is more sustainable in the long run.
Yeah, I think the predictive analytics of data is really fascinating when it comes to ag in general. A lot of people don't even realize how that's been used currently. Example would be different therapies that we've given cattle so they can be in high altitude or can stand at 102 degrees Fahrenheit and be fine. There's different types of therapies that have done that. And that comes from, viewing data and these predictive analytics and things like that. And with the way the world is changing, whether, it's climate change or different types of human activity, we're going to have to be prepared to potentially make some adjustments to farming and, raising of animals, because we may have to do it in a different place. Or you may not be able to grow Florida oranges in Florida anymore. You might have Florida passion fruit or papaya, but you'll have Florida oranges in Ohio. We're getting to that place where we're tipping scales a little bit to make adjustments. I was having this conversation a couple days ago with someone who said, isn't it amazing that the food that we had when we were kids, whether that was 40, 50 years ago, is not the same food that we have now because of the way we process now at the optimal temperatures, the optimal speed, the optimal ingredients. Everything's just orderly, really orderly. It's different because artisan is different now. The way production is different. The way we produce in the field is different. And people want to point fingers that, it was so much better back in the old days. Okay, sure. But you can't mass produce like that. It's not sustainable. But that doesn't mean that farmers aren't people that care about the environment and they're not sustainable individuals. They definitely are. They do care about what's around them and what nature's doing. I have so much respect for the fact that they understand weather better than anyone else on the entire planet. Farming understands weather. They have 4 different apps on their phone. They're savvy about it. And it makes me laugh because I barely can understand my own, because I look at one. So clearly I know nothing, as I always say. But AI is going to be able to help predict weather patterns and all this other stuff around that too, to help farmers make better decisions about when they plant, when they harvest, when they go to water, when they should be spraying, when they should not be spraying. All these things are going to come into play. And I love that you're working in this, it's kind of this dynamic, like almost pioneering field in a way, because nobody's been looking at this. Or at least not to the level that they are now, and the ability with AI moving forward. And you wrote a book on AI, didn't you? Or you did something to that effect. You want to talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's fascinating too.
Well, like something that is said all the time about machine learning and AI, at least like, let's call it deep learning, which is like probably the most complex algorithm or set of algorithms we have for developing AI systems. Like it's a black box.
Yes.
And we don't know what's going on. It sounds silly to say we build it, but we don't really know what's going on inside. The reality is, we can it's like a very complex system. You can look under the hood, but you won't understand what's going on because there's just so much. So there are ways of kind of trying to figure out what's going on. I say trying because it's like a lot of things in data. It's an act of interpretation.
Yes. Yes.
You don't really know for a fact what's going on, but you can guess it to a pretty high degree of certainty. And some methods are more certain than others, but that's what my book is about. It's called Interpretable Machine Learning with Python. And it's about that practice of looking under the hood. Because like before I worked for Syngenta, long before I had a startup, and I was a novice in machine learning. We're talking like 2005. So, and I'm like, I'm going to train this model and I'm going to put it here. And as a software engineer, I wasn't used to what came after, which was I got a ticket about something not working. And I was trying to figure out what is going on. This model is supposed to be doing this, and I couldn't debug it. So for someone that's used to debugging something and just arriving to a line of code that says, okay, this is the culprit and I have to fix this, to realizing, I hit a brick wall and there's a model here that won't let me get past this and I can't figure out what's going on here, was like a very humbling time. And it wasn't until years later that I realized what the solution for that was. What are the set of techniques to kind of look under the hood and then, as a good mechanic, figure out how to fix things. Because that's the other side of the coin, which is it's not unlike mechanics. There's not like a perfect solution, because machine learning, AI, all those things aren't perfect solutions. They will never solve a problem 100%. You will never get 100% prediction unless you're cheating, right? Because that's something that happens. Maybe you have what is called data leakage in your training data. And that's why you're getting 100% accuracy. But it's only on the test set. You won't get that in real world dynamics. I kind of equate, go ahead.
I was going to say, you just made me think of, I have this kind of thought in my head and I've never really said it out loud. So here we go. I feel like AI, especially generative AI, is sort of like interpretive dance. You kind of have to like be in the moment and present to understand what they're trying to, display as they're doing this incredible interpretive modern dance. Instead of like ballet is pretty straightforward, generally speaking. Everybody knows what Swan Lake's looking like and how that's going to move. But interpretive dance is sort of this, it makes sense. It's happening in front of you, but it's a different way of looking at it. And then you have to really think about it. And you said it's about interpretation. So I always think about like how AI is, and generally just like interpretive dance, you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt and kind of look at it in a different perspective rather than the standard way we always have looked at tools in general.
Yeah.
Sorry, you just made me think that. I was like, yeah, AI is like interpretive dance. So I don't know if that's accurate,
sure.
But that's how my mind registers it.
No, it's a good point. I mean, there is a dancing component to it. I more equate it to like a murder mystery.
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah, like there's actually, forget a Japanese movie, Akira Kurosawa from the 1960s. Well, it's about a murder. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing about murders is that if you have several people witnessing it, they'll have different perspectives and different stories. And they might use their biases and say, oh, I think this was this person. And that is not only something that happens in Hollywood. That actually happens in real life quite a bit.
Oh yeah, that's human interpretation.
Exactly. And that's something you find in data all over the place, depending on how you slice things, which is why data is so amenable for misinformation, because you can slice things in so many ways and validate a point that isn't the most truthful way of kind of interpreting it. Because you can slice the data many ways and you can pretty much come up with more likely several explanations, that are truthful enough to kind of say out loud and not get sued for it if that's like sort of risk level. You could do that. But then there's other interpretations that are definitely misleading and definitely shouldn't be used, from a statistical point of view. And the same goes with machine learning and predictions. Like it is, I can't say with every level, it gets more complicated because like there's nothing like being like at the source, where data's coming in. Whether it's machinery data or someone registering something that happened in a police report or something, that's the point of contact. That's when you know exactly what happened, right? If you witness it. If you obviously got like secondhand accounts, that's different, right? But that's where you can validate the data. But then it goes through this process where it's then stored, maintained, and so on. And then it ends up being transformed, put into machine learning models. And with each step, it gets degraded. This idea of what is true, right? Because, and it's not necessarily that it gets degraded in a bad way. It's just that it's just natural that when you aggregate data, you're not going to get truth about individual data points. You're going to get that truth in aggregate. And so nobody's creating machine learning models of one observation, right? That's not happening. You're getting massive amounts of data and creating machine learning models on that. So you're getting, an aggregate idea of what's going on. In the same way that when you're asking in a large language model something, you're getting in aggregate what would follow the next token, the next word in aggregate. And there's variation to it because it's inherently stochastic. So it's not always going to be the same. So I can't tell you exactly what the next word would be, but it would be a likely word. I can tell you that it's not going to be gibberish, right? And so the thing is, like all these processes, they become aggregate. So it becomes a practice of deconstruction to then I'm going to take the predictions of machine learning model and figure out what's going on here because I want to figure out basically what is not only the truth for this prediction, but predictions like it, like similar like observations to the one I'm trying to predict for. Right. So in a sense, you're pretty much going to trace it back to the training data and figure out, okay, what's similar to the training data that might have skewed this in this direction. It doesn't necessarily make it wrong. It just means, well, maybe you don't have enough variation in the training data. Maybe the training data is already biased because it was biased from the source already.
Yeah.
You're all trying to trace it back to those origins because ultimately that's what matters. But what I tell people about the misleading nature about aggregation is that humans aren't used to seeing information at that level and understanding it holistically. That's built into our hardware. Like when we were tribal groups much smaller, and we could identify data points just by pointing them, right? And we didn't have to say, okay, well, this belongs to a larger group of people or of things that we can't possibly imagine.
I mean, that kind of goes back to not everyone's a systems thinker, right? So if you aren't a systems thinker, it's hard for you to grasp that next layer out behind you or beyond that. And those of us that are systems thinkers find it strange that people don't think like system thinkers.
Yeah.
And not in a bad way, just in a, wow, you think differently than me. Okay, I don't know how to talk to you right now. Let me figure out how to speak to you. That happens quite frequently, actually. And it's okay. And this is why the world is the way it is, and round and wonderful and beautiful.
Hi, we're Anz and Sage. And if you're in food production, agriculture, and even running a zoo or an aquarium, we need to talk. Because let's be honest, your operation relies on a lot more technology than most people realize. Grain dryers, hatchery controls, life support systems for animal habitats, all connected, all critical, all often overlooked when it comes to cybersecurity. That's where we come in. At Anz and Sage, we help industries that grow, feed, and inspire the world manage cybersecurity and operational risks without the fear tactics, the fluff, or the 200-page audit you'll never read. Whether you're producing milk, processing seafood, or running life support systems, we focus on what matters, keeping your operations safe, your people protected, and your business running, even when things go sideways. And hey, we know not everyone on your team speaks cyber. And because not everyone on your team speaks cyber, we've created a free resource library at anzandsage.com. Inside, you'll find sector-specific infographics built for teams in agriculture, seafood, zoos, and aquariums. They're clear, practical, a little witty, and designed to help frontline teams understand the risks without needing a translator. No logins, no email required, no catch, just usable tools that make cybersecurity stick. If you're responsible for keeping food moving, animals safe, and systems online, Anz and Sage is your partner in real-world resilience. Visit anzandsage.com to download your free infographics, book a consult, or just learn more about how we're helping critical infrastructures secure what matters most. Anz and Sage, helping the industries that grow, feed, and inspire the world manage cybersecurity and operational risks.
I was thinking while you're talking, so just to swing it back a little bit into ag for a moment and kind of going back to more of the work you're doing, what do you see as the future for data and AI and agriculture moving forward? I know that there's some really cool things that are happening in the background, but just curious what you think the future is going to look like.
Yeah, I think I'm hopeful on a lot of things in the sense that we have to come to terms of what kind of resources we can handle and we can manage, right?
That's right.
Stop believing in kind of fairy tales about, like, let's just hit the water table and we'll have water there forever. And let's just, use these energy sources that are going to run out in very little time. Go back to the idea that we have pretty much a nuclear power plant in the sky that's far greater than anything we could possibly generate on Earth. Let's just leverage that. We have plenty of wind, plenty of tides, geothermal energy. It just makes sense to harness that for agriculture because it's the way the plants are thriving off those energy sources to begin with. So if we need to scale it, we should scale it with that. Obviously, the plants are not going to get, if we want them to grow in the crazy amounts we need them to grow year round, they're not going to get that from the sun alone. We have to maximize that in different ways, whether it's greenhouses or creating fertilizer, which takes up energy or things like that. But then we have to think about the runaway effects of putting too much fertilizer in the soil and how that affects everything else. So there's a lot of sustainability components. Obviously to me, it's not a black and white situation where we have to have it this way or there's a gradual route there. But we shouldn't also think it's gradual, so we can take 200 years. No, I think it's probably something we have to think of doing more like in a concerted, global effort to do in the next decades, because I think it does it's not like if you've seen, I'm trying to think of the movie, it's about exploration of space and on Earth, like there's crop collapses. I don't know if you've seen it.
I don't know. I'm not normally into space movies, so I'm sorry.
Okay. Doesn't matter. Well, the point is, it's not science fiction for me. It definitely can happen that crops will collapse. And it will collapse to a lot of monoculture crops. So like bananas and crops that actually pretty much are the same clone. Those are the ones first to go. And the ones that are the same species. And I think that's the thing that's lost in the discussion, which is there's good reasons to keep different species, keep the seeds and keep them as backup and grow them for different things, find purposes for them, just because who knows, maybe, one entire species gets wiped out and we still will need these staple crops for something. I think a lot of people would be sad if bananas disappeared.
No, I wouldn't be. I'm allergic to them. Goodbye, bananas.
Okay.
I don't care.
Okay. Well, I would be a little bit sad, but it's still.
No, that's fine. I understand. I respect people who eat them.
It's not a staple crop. It's not a staple crop anywhere. I think it's considered like an addition.
Yeah, a lot of people don't even know that bananas are cloned either. They have no idea that bananas are cloned of things. And the movie you were talking about was Interstellar, by the way. I quickly looked it up thanks to the power of Google.
Yeah.
And now I remember because I have seen that movie. Yes, but you're so right. But I think it's more of the stock crops that I'm worried about collapsing, right? So like corn and rice and soy as just 3 examples out there. Those would be devastating. If we lose bananas, people will get over it. They'll be sad about it, but they'll get over it. Yeah. I think that those, or wheat too. I suppose I should put wheat in there as well.
Yeah.
But that if we lost
fisheries,
fisheries, yes.
Like it might not be worldwide, maybe like an entire, ocean of fishes disappears. Just simply, they can't thrive there. That would be devastating for cultures that depend on that. I can't imagine Japan without fish. Other people would be fine, like I'll have beef instead, but like, it's just not, we should consider kind of balancing things out in that sense, and considering, cultural implications.
Definitely. And I think that's why we have, like fishing stock limits. You can't pull for a certain periods of time. You can't pull like pregnant lobsters, for example. It's so fascinating how we just took and we didn't even think because we just expected abundance at a certain period of time. And now we're like, oh, whoops. It would have been nice if we could have had those data points back when the turning was happening. We maybe wouldn't have lost so many of these various different crops, and that's why we have to do factory farming fishing now in terms of big schools of fish are raised in farms, which is all IoT and all interconnected on the internet. It's wild, actually. Yeah. Wild in like the best sense, not wild in like, oh God, like it's more like this is cool. We're using tech for these really great reasons, but also for really sad reasons because we overfished, we shouldn't have done that. Maybe someday we can reverse that. I see
this going back into the original question, which was, how do you see the future of farming? I think you make a very valid point about the fish. I think a lot of these things, really, like fish shouldn't be, I think, any different than the way we produce other animal-based foods. We should have full control of the way it's done. We either do it in the natural way, like people are doing with oysters, and it's actually good for the environment, or we contain it. And some people are literally containing it, putting it in a container. And I don't know if you've seen these container startups out there, but I find them fascinating where they'll have this symbiotic system where they have fishes that actually their waste goes to fertilize the soil that's beneath it, and it grows plants, and these plants feed the fishes, and some of those plants go to the humans, obviously. And so you have this system where it's just completely contained. We should be thinking more in that sense. Okay, it's not a question, okay, this is the food I want, right? Which is the way we've used to do it, which is like an outlook of complete abundance, which I like abundance. Everybody does, but I think
everybody likes abundance.
We should be more thinking, okay, well, let's just play around with the seasons a bit more, figure out what's available and how we can work. Maybe there's things that can help us get avocados year round, but just think of how we can get avocados year round in a sustainable fashion. And if not possible, just live with the way it used to be, which you would only get a season of avocados. Yeah. I think that would make more sense.
Yeah, it's consumer driven. I think a lot. I think if consumers were more educated and the information we have available, and again, it goes back to disinformation, misinformation, people don't understand what's happening. I think if we had a better understanding of those particular different data points, maybe people will be a little bit more like, it's okay, I can wait for avocados until wherever, it's okay. I think that what you're describing, if anyone has ever been to Walt Disney World and been on the ride, The Land, it's a little boat ride that's over by Soarin'. So if you ever do that ride, in Epcot, it takes you on a little boat ride and it shows you exactly what you were just describing, how fish are supplying the nutrients for plants. It's this really neat display. And then they talk about it if you do the tour. I think they also talk about it on multiple Imagineer type documentaries they've done as well. They actually are doing a lot. Disney's actually a full research house. It's actually pretty incredible. People don't even know that. They're moving the needle on animal conservation as well as various different agricultural things and culture. So if you get a chance to ever see that, it's worth the boat ride. It's also air conditioned and cool in there and it's quiet. So you get a break if you need that. But I immediately thought of that when you said it. I was like, yes, absolutely. I've seen it and it's great. It's such a great way to do things. It goes to show you how symbiotic relationships between certain elements, plant, animal, mineral, and things like that are so important. And again, we can't really do anything moving forward in the future without that data that you've mentioned. So I think that is such a great way to look at it for sure. Anything you want to leave before we sign off? This has been fascinating conversation and you definitely made me laugh. So I appreciate that.
No, I think, if they're the listeners of this podcast are probably pretty engaged with food and how it's produced and what goes into food and all these things. But there's a lot of people that haven't, they haven't put a lot of thought into that. So I would urge people to bring them into the conversation about food and not let it be, driven by other things, like changes in geopolitics or supply chains and all that before they realize, oh, this comes from here, because it is cool to actually engage with that, and even if it could become a hobby, planting some food in their backyard or some community gardening, or even just simply paying attention, seeing these documentaries like you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. Or even just taking a walk.
Fascinating. Exactly.
Or even just taking a walk. And I live pretty close to an arboretum, and it's an experimental farm as well. And I think that if people took more time to walk through nature, because I was saying that on a walk recently, that I'm so grateful that I'm close to this type of space, open space, because if you're going to be in the city, you're not going to see it as much. You kind of need to get out and remember what the cycles of life look like in nature and remember that it really is about that and not necessarily about the grind of a city or a grind of your life. And I think once you start to look at the natural cycles like that, I think you can be a little bit more open and start to see through some of the disinformation, misinformation a little bit better. But yeah, you're right. I love talking about food. People always ask me crazy food questions anyways. I'm not a super educated person, but I know enough that I can be dangerous in my conversations. And it sounds like you are too. And it's I think if you stay with an open, curious mind, it just makes it so much more interesting. Like you just said, so that's fabulous.
Yeah. Stay curious.
Stay curious.
That's the underlying message. Yeah.
It's great. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. This was really great. And I'm sure we'll probably have you back again because obviously this is a continuing conversation. We're going to keep talking about data and AI and agriculture and in food moving forward. So thank you so much.
Sure. No problem. Take care.
Before we wrap up, I just want to say thank you so much to Serg for such a thoughtful and generous conversation, and for helping make complex ideas about data, AI, and agricultural feel grounded, human, and accessible. And to you, the listeners, thank you for spending your time here. If this episode resonated with you, please like, comment, and share, or pass it along to someone who'd appreciate it. Every share really does help more people find these important conversations, and I appreciate it more than I can ever say. As you celebrate the holidays, I hope it's with great food, and that you feel a bit of pride knowing that there are people all over the world working hard to protect and secure the systems behind it, so we can continue keeping our traditions alive. From me to you, happy holidays. Stay safe, stay curious, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.